Well, if you wanted manufactured outrage, look no further than CBR. Hey everybody, it's The Last Raider. We're back today. And today I did a video earlier I put out on The Mandalorian. How Forbes was sitting there looking at it saying, you know what, we can't figure out why there's no outrage. Well, ask and ye shall receive. When there's no outrage to be found anywhere, SJW will manufacture it. What we have here in the title, The Mandalorian, Cara Dune triggers outrage by being female in Star Wars. You're going to find here they've got questionable sources. It's questionable because it's actually just a critique of the show. Most of the problems, I think, with Cara Dune, I actually didn't have a problem with the character. In fact, my wife, she actually stated, she said, we were watching it, and she goes, she kind of just ambushed the Mandalorian. She said anybody would be in a bad position if you got ambushed. And it's like, well, yeah, she probably had a plan, and she executed the plan. Anyone can beat you in an ambush. They'll talk about it in here. But let's get going, because we need to talk about this nonsense. For almost the entire Disney era of Star Wars, a subsection of the franchise fans has complained about every female character who's played a leading role. There's probably a reason for that. Actually, tell you what, they didn't just complain about every female character on a leading role. They did complain about, let's see, I think it was The Last Jedi, where Princess Leia Organa, Mary Poppins is her way back into the ship. Everyone's like, that's such bullshit. Because you've completely ignored the Legends canon. We don't even know if Princess Leia has had any training. I believe in the Legends canon, she got some Force training, possibly. I'm not sure. I remember that she did get some beforehand, and she actually ended up facing off against either a form of Darth Vader or something. She faced off against something somewhere and got some sort of weird lightsaber crystal. I know that much. But I mean, as far as, Mary Poppinsing her way back into the ship, fans complained about that because that didn't match the original movies. But hey, let's just keep going. Complained about every female character who's played a leading role. Raya has been labeled a Mary Sue. Rose Tico has been called useless or out of place. From what I understand it was, but I have not seen the movie, so I'm not going to make... Rey is a bit of a Mary Sue because she's a kid on a desert planet that's never flown something like the Millennium. Mind you, the Millennium Falcon is not a fighter, it's a frigate. Okay, it requires a little bit more work. That's why the cockpit is a whole lot bigger than a fighter. Jyn Erso has been dismissed as flat, and Quiara, the hell was Quiara, was labeled as underdeveloped. Not sure who that character is either. I haven't seen that stuff yet. Without fail, a vocal minority has criticized the women of Star Wars for ruining the films in which they appear. And they do make, this is kind of correct. It is a vocal minority. From what I've seen, it's only been the only person on here who even has the level of voice, or the vocal qualifies in the level on a vocal minority, is they have Ethan Van Sciver down here who did a video on it, which we'll look at that here in just a second. That's now followed the property to the small screen with the new Disney Plus series, The Mandalorian. For the first 3 episodes, fans remain almost uniformly passionate about the adventures of the mysterious bounty hunter. However, the 4th episode introduced 2 women, Cara Dune, an ex-rebel shock trooper played by Gina Carano, I think? I'm not good with names. And Omera, a native of the planet Sorgan. Put an M by that, you got sorghum. Anywho, drawing the ire of certain Star Wars devotees. In other words, they're going to lump the entire fandom menace onto a tweet and a video from on a tweet from one person and a video from Ethan Van Sciver. That's apparently the entire fandom menace's concept of it. Okay, let's keep going. In breaking down why they're angry, however, it becomes clear the reasons for their objections are patently ridiculous. Oh, really? Let's see how that works out then. Forced diversity. Now, this is hang on, let me read this first. One of the big criticisms is that is that these new women in Star Wars represent a form of forced diversity in which female characters, LGBT characters, or people of color are given prominent roles in a narrative. According to the people who employ the term forced diversity as a serious critique, it's a bad practice to cast women of color into Star Wars because it isn't necessary. No. This is completely false. CBR is lying here. The term forced diversity is casting a character in a role in Star Wars that normally you wouldn't need that person to be in. You're not putting the character in there for story. In other words, we're not putting a black character in there for story purposes. We're not putting an LGBT character in there for story purposes. We're doing it because we want a black character and we want an LGBT character and we want to check a bunch of little boxes. For CBR, the sequel fans, mind you, let's stop and look at this for a minute. We have Mace Windu, who was a black Jedi. All of the clone troopers were not white. Okay? Lando Calrissian back in the 70s was black, and that was in the Empire Strikes Back after or before they ended up making the switch from James Earl Jones to the other white guy. I don't know who it was. James Earl Jones is black, for those of you who don't know. Amazing voice on that guy. Impressive actor. One of my more favorite actors. But the thing is, you're forcing it was kind of dumb because people are saying, well, that would be. Some people like to say that the that the swapping of James Earl Jones out for the white guy was bad for Anakin Skywalker. But in reality, it's like, okay, Luke Skywalker is blonde hair, blue eyed, white. Okay, your explanation for why James Earl Jones is black. Also, who is black, mind you, being Darth Vader as the father of Luke. Also, if you stop and think about it as well, they didn't make a black guy the bad guy. Okay, they very could have easily done that, and that was back in the 70s, and it was decided not to. They just used the voice of James Earl Jones, and even James Earl Jones, I think, has come out and said, story-wise, it wouldn't have made sense for his face to be in there. But he is credited for having the voice, for providing the iconic voice of Darth Vader, which they've never been able to replicate since then. Okay? But that is the problem with the forced diversity nonsense. There's a lot of SJWs who throw a fit about how Darth Vader was swapped out for a white guy at the very end, and he was swapped for story. Okay? It would not have made sense for a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy to have a black dad. Not to mention, we've had plenty of black characters, plenty of strong women in the entire Star Wars series. The Fandom Menace doesn't complain about Ahsoka, who is it? Ahsoka, Sakura. Let's see. Who else are we going to pull out here? I don't hear very many critiques about Savine. I don't hear any critiques about Jade Skywalker, I think it is. I'm not sure. But I mean, you also have Princess Leia in there, Padme. You don't hear that many critiques about those characters. They're good characters. They're not there because they're women. They're there because the story demanded a woman. So the forced diversity argument, this is just an attempt by CBR to give a false definition of forced diversity and then try to dismiss it under the rug. It's stupid that, and as I said, it's a bad practice. They said, according to people who employ the term forced diversity as a serious critique, it's bad practice to cast women of color into Star Wars because it isn't necessary. No. It's not that it isn't necessary. It's the fact of you're casting these forced diversity is you have a character and you want to make that character black for some reason. It's like sitting there and saying, you know what, we don't have enough representation. There should be black Nazis. That was kind of the thing that was kind of my critique over the movie Spirit, when he's sitting there and he goes, Nazis. It's always Nazis. And then Samuel L. Jackson comes out as black. And it's like, no, that doesn't work, man. Not in Hitler's worst nightmare does that work. I'm sorry. But let's continue. This criticism is difficult to take seriously. No, it's not. But even harder when one sees that these diversity critiques draw issues with and don't draw issue what the critiques draw issue with and don't draw issue with. Rey is a young woman who has had to fight all of her life on a desert planet full of bandits and can swing a lightsaber with some degree of efficiency. But anyone in HEMA will tell you that there's a fundamental difference between using a bow staff or a quarterstaff and a sword. Okay? And on top of that, okay, she can fight with a bow staff. Fine, we'll give you that. Kylo Ren has been trained by Luke Skywalker, who defeated Darth Vader, for fuck's sake. All right? And it was only because Palpatine's force powers is like a basic, because Luke Skywalker decided to put his sword away and take on Palpatine on a force-on-force battle, and Palpatine's way stronger in the Force than Luke ever thought about being. Yet somehow Rey is going to match Kylo Ren and beat him. Either Kylo Ren sucks as a lightsaber duelist, or Rey is a Mary Sue. Because where is she at? Every single person she runs into, she beats the crap out of him. Luke Skywalker in his first fight in a bar, he had a lightsaber strapped to his hip and he got slapped to the floor. He got thrown to the floor over nonsense. I think another time he's usually end up getting his ass kicked in the first movie almost halfway through it. Rey's beating the shit out of everything. Hell, she's shooting, she's sitting there flying the Millennium Falcon without even knowing what the stupid angle is of the gun, and ends up turning the Millennium Falcon just perfectly so that Finn can line up a shot. And everyone's saying, well, Rey's really powerful in the Force. So is Yoda. So was Qui-Gon. So was Obi-Wan. So was Anakin. For God's sakes, Anakin Skywalker. Who's probably, at the rate that they're now trying to say, is second to Rey. All of them had to have some form of training with lightsaber combat. It's not something that's intuitive to the Force. If you look at the Jedi and how they operate, lightsaber dueling was taught as a completely different, separate discipline to Force using. Only after a Jedi had assumed some form of mastery of both could they begin to combine the two disciplines and use them in tandem. Okay? There was complete differences with those two. Rey somehow is using it. Also, this doesn't make any sense because in Star Wars Rebels, they dictate that a lightsaber, according to in Rebels, the lightsaber actually becomes very heavy when you first use it, and as you become more attuned to the crystal. The problem is, how the heck does Rey become attuned to a crystal that's been attuned to someone else? If you look at the way the Jedi got crystals, a Jedi picked their own personal crystal because this was easier. Okay? Everything about Rey is there to push that, oh, look, she's just better than everyone. She picks up a lightsaber. Normally there's all these rules. They don't apply to Rey. None of the rules of the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, none of them apply to Rey at all. It's not that she's a woman. It's the fact that she's a woman and a Mary Sue, because they don't want a woman. Their politics are getting in the way of Rey not being a Mary Sue, or her being a Mary Sue. But let's get through this right now, because I'm just going to head right on down here after this. That's bad according to these critiques. No, it's bad because she doesn't show, there's no struggling showed. We can't have Rey struggle or fail at anything. Okay? I've seen the lightsaber duel of The Last Jedi. Rey kicks one dude, three of them go flying. Okay? It just sucks. All right? They were so intent on making her an actual character. There were so many opportunities in that fight that they could have, brought Rey down a couple of pegs and made her kind of struggle in the fight and really, made the fight intense. There's actually, you got the disappearing dagger to make Rey's character look even more Mary Sue-ish. Likewise, she can use some minor force powers without training, as seen when she intuitively manipulates a stormtrooper using a Jedi mind trick. Okay, this is not a minor force power, because Luke Skywalker had to have an intense amount of training. It wasn't until the Return of the Jedi does Luke Skywalker even show the ability or even attempt the ability of using what is it now? The Jedi mind trick. And even then there's a limit to it. Rey, the excuse is because Kylo tried to do it to her, she downloads it automatically into her subconscious and knows how to use it. It's like, okay, so you're telling me no Jedi has ever figured this out before, A. And B, if it's only a unique thing to Rey, why? Why is it only unique to her? Oh, that's right. She's got to have her own special force powers. According to some of the stuff now that's coming out, Rey's going to be teleporting people. The fact is, I will harp on this one thing, and then we'll get down to CBR's reasoning for this excuse. Kathleen Kennedy came out and lied to everyone. She came out and said that there was no critique material. However, there are force powers that are being used in the new movie. The teleportation and the ion storm that's being used by Palpatine, the lightning going up, that's Palpatine's ion storm. That's from an essential guide to Star Wars. That's the Star Wars Essential Guide, I believe, iteration 1 or 2, where there's actually a group of monks who teleport across the galaxy. They know how to teleport objects. There was a guy that Yoda sent to him that had a disease. And from learning the Force from them, he managed to heal himself from the disease. And then the Force lightning thing is something that the Force ion storm is something that Palpatine talks about that he's experimenting with in one of his holocrons, but hasn't quite figured out how to use. So Kathleen Kennedy is going other places to come up with stuff. She's just whipping out force powers from random areas of the universe, anything that sounds cool, and putting them in there. So she's just outright lying to everybody when she says there's no critique material. She knows there's material out there to use. She's just picking what she wants to use. But I mean, let's also look back here for just a second. Likewise, she can use some minor force powers without training. I know I read that again, but let's look at that for a minute. Every other person that's used the Force so far has had to have some form of training. Baby Yoda, for instance, is 50 years old, and his people are naturally Force sensitive. Okay, so it's quite obvious that picking up something for Baby Yoda is like learning how to walk. Whereas Rey, humans are not like that. We know that humans are everywhere on the Force scale. Sometimes they can be really powerful, sometimes they cannot be. Yoda's race stays at about a high level, and they're almost always more powerful than the original Sith. Okay? But let's go down here. And they talk about, how Yoda lifts us up, which I tell people to look at the X-Wing scene where Yoda, I almost said Baby Yoda, where Yoda sits back and says, Luke is trying to lift the X-Wing out of the swamp, and Yoda says something to the effect of, matters not the size of the object to the Force. There's no try, there's just do. Believe in the Force or something to that effect. and you can lift it. It doesn't matter how big the object is, which in reality, I guess it depends on your own confidence in the Force to some extent. I'm not quite sure how that would operate. It's been a while since I've seen the Empire Strikes Back. By the way, they talk about criticism surrounding Amara. Amara in here was in this episode. Spoiler alert: Amara knows how to shoot a blaster. Okay, and she shoots a blaster fairly well compared to everyone else. But this is a Magnificent Seven episode. And there's in the Magnificent Seven style spaghetti western, there's always a widow that knows how to shoot a gun because her husband knew how to shoot guns. He got on the wrong side of somebody and he was cautious and taught his wife how to shoot, so she knew how to shoot. Her husband was responsible. And then we got a critique from on the Cara Dune and all this. Come on, CBR. Okay, so where we're going to go next is all right. All right, here we go. We have here, this is CBR's, and I'll link this so you can go look at it yourself. But this is one of CBR's proof or receipt this is happening. This guy's talking about Ethan Van Sciver, which he talks about how Ethan Van Sciver went. This is what Ethan Van Sciver said at the beginning of his episode here. Here. power this up with it.
All right, it's Comic Artist Pro Secrets, and I'm Ethan Van Sciver, 26-year veteran of the comic book industry, and I just watched Mandalorian Episode 4. Have you watched it yet? Well, if not, go watch it right now, and then come on back to your Uncle Ethan, and let's talk about it. Let's talk about how it made us all feel, and what we thought of the episode. I liked it. I thought the episode was pretty delightful, full of a lot of sugar to make the feminist go down, and that's not an easy thing to do. Of course, there was lots of Baby Yoda in this, a lot of Baby Yoda action, and that was fun to look at. And there was also the ATST, the Imperial Walker, the Chicken Walker, if you grew up in the 80s, and that was great too. But mostly what there was a heaping helping of feminist-pleasing weirdness. A big, thick woman played by Gina.
And that's about it. Ethan Van Sciver's Ethan Van Sciver's critique on it was, there was some stuff in there that kind of hinted at feminism to whatnot. But even Ethan Van Sciver and all of them were saying we have to wait until episode 4 before you see what's going on, because that was the one where the one chick was directing it. I can't remember her name right now, but she actually did a pretty good job in my opinion. But, anyway, in the scene that Ethan Van Sciver talks about the Mandalorian getting beaten, there's a couple problems with the scene. One, Mandalorian's got a high amount of Beskar on. The way whoever did the fight choreography in there, basically, spoiler alert if you ain't seen it, but in there, Cara pretty much picks the battlefield. She jumps the Mandalorian, and she gets the upper hand by tactics. Okay, and I can respect that because she recognizes that the Mandalorian is a bounty hunter, and in there she even explains afterwards. She said, "I thought you were here to come." She explains she's a rebel shock trooper, and she said that's why I came at you so hard. I thought they were coming to take me back. She's afraid of going back to where, and that kind of creates an interesting story. My thing about it is, it's been the Mary Sue character where the woman's just beating down the guy so much has been done so often that people are they're sick and tired of it, and they automatically. It's almost like dog whistling to them now in that aspect. But this is that one little video, which now Ethan Van Sciver is the vocal minority, I guess, now, according to CBR. But let's go even further down here because we've got, all right, Cara Dune can fight. Yes, she's a rebel shock trooper. She should be. But we go down here. This is the second one. And here's the interesting part, because this guy here, which is funny, this one is, I believe, I can check on this. We're bouncing around all over the place. This is Jar Jar, not Abrams. This is their other proof that this is that the fandom menace is bitching about these characters and just going nuts. This blank account is not affiliated with J.J. Abrams, Lucasfilm, and Disney. Blank and blank commentary on Star Wars with humor. And you can see here he's kind of doing the Darth helmet thing with Jar Jar Abrams, and it's a parody account basically that goes on there. Sometimes says things that are off the wall, but this is a reputable source. Okay, this is a reputable source. The fandom menace is going insane. Okay, they're angry about this. The thing is, Cara Dune is a shock trooper, so I mean she's good at close range combat probably. Whereas with the Mandalorian, it's not the Mandalorian can't fight. I mean, we saw him deal with those lizard guys. I forgot what their names are, but if you look up Star Wars lore, those dudes are not easy to take down, much less in a fist fight. I think he disintegrates one of them and uses most of his blasters to take care of them. But Cara Dune probably recognized he was a Mandalorian, knew he had weapons. She picked a location in which she had a good where she had the most advantages. Jumped him so that he's knocked off balance and managed to maintain. However, during the fight, the Mandalorian does actually start to come back in the fight. He begins to start getting the upper hand. And so she goes for her blaster, he goes for his blaster and land. The problem I have with the way the fight ended, though, was when the Mandalorian lands on the ground, you can tell there's no way his visor is giving him an accurate picture. The overhang on his visor, there's no way he can see what's above him. It should have landed with her on her back looking at him and him with himself upward like she is pointing down. They should have swapped places. That way he would have been able. That way he's looking down through his visor, through the T visor on his helmet. But yeah, this is all of it, and they make this notion that everyone's saying the Mandalorian is unstoppable. No, the Mandalorian is not unstoppable. He's more like a Star Wars Desert Punk. Okay, if you ever watched the show Desert Punk, Desert Punk is not. Is unstoppable because he outthinks his opponent most of the time. There's one where Desert Punk ends up fighting a really good sniper who like takes his sniper. Like Desert Punk has an M700. This guy has a Dragunov, and he takes out Desert Punk's M700 within the first several seconds of the show of the episode. And so at the very end, Desert Punk's trying everything he can to get his backpack back, and the guy is, the sniper has his backpack, and so Desert Punk figures out, and he's like, man, I hate to do this. And Desert Punk activates a couple of paint bombs that are inside of his smoke grenades and paint bombs that are inside the bottom of his backpack, which blinds the sniper, tells Desert Punk where he's at, and then it deploys a whole bunch of these balloon decoys that look like Desert Punk floating around. And he uses that to get close for the sniper to drop his guard, gets close to him, and takes him down. But otherwise, he beats his opponents with tactics. He takes out a tank in this series. It's a good show. I mean, I hated the way it ended because, never mind. But I mean, it's a really good and a funny show. To give you an idea of how funny it is, there's actually a literal line used literally, in which one guy of the Machine Gun Brothers, who the Machine Gun Brothers are just a hoot, where they sit there, look at Desert Punk and say, "You were hiding in the shit." And that's a literal term, okay? That episode's hilarious. That one's hilarious. There's a lot of crappy jokes in that one. But yeah, this is the extent of journalism. Like, the Fandom Menace is now being determined by a parody count and one person critiquing the women inside of a show. All right, we need outrage. We're going to manufacture it with the tiniest. If CBR can twist it just a little bit, we can just get a little. We can just take something out there, even if it's a parody account, even if it's Ethan Van Sciver up there, as I showed you before, saying the majority of the episode was good. And in Ethan's video, he kind of talked about the episode had a little bit of stuff for everyone. Okay. He didn't enjoy the two women being total badasses the entire time, which, in my opinion, they weren't. I think Ethan Van Sciver might suffer from some feminist PTSD or some nonsense. Kind of like Myers, who has black female PTSD. I think it's just they're a little. Some of the fans that are complaining about it probably just a little gun shy from the Last Jedi and Rey and all that nonsense, because Rey's a colossal Mary Sue. But anyway, tell me what you think about this. A little bit of a longer video today. Sorry about that. There's just a lot to unpack with some nonsense like this. Tell me what you think about it in the comments. Be sure to like, subscribe. Also, if you go check out Ethan Van Sciver's video, be sure to tell everyone that you come from my channel, and also link this video in your comment, because that'll help grow the channel, and I will appreciate that very much. As always, I'm the Last Raider. Keep your head on a swivel and stay frosty. I'll see y'all next time.